Hello, welcome to Hidden History and Odyssey Through Time. I'm your host, John Rodriguez, and welcome to the best history podcast in New York State. This is episode 31 of the podcast, and the title of this episode is A Forgotten French Hero, Admiral de Grasse in the American War of Independence. According to a survey conducted by the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia in 2009, 83% of adult Americans did not have a basic understanding of the American Revolution. Fast forward 15 years to 2024 and ask yourself this: has that 83% gone down at all? It is the humble opinion of this historian that more Americans now do not have a basic understanding of the American Revolution compared to 2009. All Americans should know the basic facts about how the greatest country in the world came into existence. So let's dive in, shall we? The American Revolutionary War from 1775 to 1783, also known as the American Revolution, was sparked by growing tensions between residents of Great Britain's 13 North American colonies and the colonial government, represented by the British Crown. Although the American Revolution began on April 19, 1775, with the shot heard round the world at Lexington and Concord, revolt against British colonial rule began years before war was formally declared. By the summer of 1776, the Patriots were waging a full-scale insurrection against Great Britain and King George III for their independence and the rights due every citizen. When France entered the American Revolution on the side of the Patriots in February 1778, the conflict went from what had essentially been a civil war to a world war. Through France, Spain indirectly supported the new United States, and Dutch merchants in the Netherlands sold war materials to the Patriots. France was America's first international ally, and their partnership during the Revolutionary War helped the United States to achieve its independence. Between 1778 and 1782, the French provided supplies, arms and ammunition, uniforms, and most importantly, troops and naval support to the Continental Army. The French Navy transported reinforcements, fought off a British fleet, and protected Washington's forces in Virginia. French assistance was also crucial in securing the British surrender at Yorktown in 1781. For those who are aware that France helped the United States during the American Revolutionary War, you may be familiar with the Marquis de Lafayette, the French hero of the American Revolution who served the Continental Army with distinction, providing tactical leadership while securing vital resources from France. Lafayette, who was held in high esteem by George Washington himself, even named his newly born son George Washington de Lafayette in honor of the American Revolutionary and future first president of the United States in 1779. Throughout our land, Lafayette has been perpetuated by no less than 7 monuments. His name has been given to a college, highways, streets, buildings, theaters, and whatnot, and rightfully so. However, there is another French hero of the American Revolution who deserves to be recognized. While French Admiral Francois-Joseph Paul de Grasse's name has been scarcely a memory in the United States and unknown even to most people in France, strong naval support from de Grasse's fleet was essential during the American Revolution. No ordinary type of naval officer, but one of wide experience in actual battle, as well as an accomplished strategist and tactician, Admiral de Grasse prevented the British Navy from reinforcing Yorktown during the Siege of Yorktown in September 1781, which ultimately led to British surrender and the end of the American War of Independence. Admiral Francois-Joseph Paul de Grasse's story, hidden history that has remained long forgotten, is the story of a French naval hero who played a significant role in the American Revolution, and a small underdeveloped nation determined to be free from the greatest military force of its time. Francois-Joseph Paul de Grasse was born on September 13, 1722, at the feudal castle of Bar, a lovely little village of Provence, situated 6 miles from the town of de Grasse in southeastern France. The de Grasse family was one of the oldest of the French nobility and boasted of its alliance by intermarriage with the royal houses of France, Spain, and Sicily. Due to his noble family, Francois held the title Comte, French for Count, and was the last child of Francois de Grasse Rouville, Marquis de Grasse. Robust from the start, in early childhood Francois developed a liking for energetic sports. It is also said that his private tutor was unable to handle his impulsive personality and emotional outbursts. Francois was a rowdy child, and it was common to find him exploring the gorges and slopes surrounding the castle he lived in. Such a spirit as this must be tamed, so when Francois was 11, his parents decided to send him to naval school, where he would be trained to become a naval officer. Good behavior and a promising character at the naval school resulted in Francois being accepted to the Order of the Knights of Malta. The founding of the Order of the Knights of Malta dates back to 1048 AD with the Hospitallers of St. John of Jerusalem, and acquired great wealth and power during the Crusades. When the Holy Lands reverted to the Muslims, the order left the Holy Lands and moved from place to place until they finally obtained from Emperor Charles V, King of Spain, the privilege of settling on the island of Malta. There they equipped ships for the defense of the Mediterranean Sea against the Muslim pirates. In fact, at the time young Francois joined, the Order of the Knights of Malta were alone in combating these pirates with any success. It was then, at the age of 12, that Francois began a long and illustrious career as a sea fighter. In his heart was a love of the sea and adventure, and the young sailor quickly developed a sturdy physique and a calm and self-reliance which benefited Francois during later sea fights. His energy and impulsiveness led him into the thick of every fray, and even in later years he retained these most typical characteristics. Of his exceptional bravery, friend and foe alike could testify on his behalf. As attendant to the great master of Malta, as midshipman, and as an ensign, Francois went through numerous strenuous campaigns in the Mediterranean against the Moorish pirates. Between 1739 and 1742, accounts differ online, Francois de Grasse entered the French Navy and served on board numerous vessels. On May 11, 1747, de Grasse was on board a frigate that was part of a squadron of 6 ships and 6 frigates when they were challenged by 17 English vessels. After a vigorous battle, 6 French vessels, including the one de Grasse was on, were captured, and de Grasse was taken to England a prisoner, where he remained for 2 years. While a prisoner, de Grasse acquired many English friends and gained knowledge of the enemy that would be useful in the years to come. Upon his return to France, de Grasse was promoted to what we would call first lieutenant here in the United States, and participated in divers campaigns in the Mediterranean and the West Indies until 1758, when he received command of the sloop Sapphire. He remained on this vessel for 3 years and accomplished various important missions. In January 1762, he was promoted to captain and took part in another campaign in Santo Domingo and the West Indies. In 1764, he received the title of Chevalier de St. Louis and assumed command of the frigate Heroine in the squadron of Comte de Chaffaut. It was around this time that 42-year-old de Grasse got married to a French woman named Antoinette Rosalie Acaron, and she would go on to give birth to 7 children, 1 son and 6 daughters, before dying at the age of 29. Between voyages, de Grasse would get married for a second time, to Dame Catherine de Pienne, but she was also to die soon after. Various services called de Grasse to all parts of the world, and de Grasse was ripe in experience, which France and the budding new republic in America were soon to have need of. For more than a decade before the outbreak of the American Revolution in 1775, tensions had been building between colonists and the British authorities. The French and Indian War, or 7 Years' War, from 1756 to 1763, brought new territories under the power of the English crown, but the expensive conflict led to new and unpopular taxes. Attempts by the British government to raise revenue by taxing the colonies, notably the Stamp Act of 1765, the Townshend Acts of 1767, and the Tea Act of 1773, met with heated protest among many colonists who resented their lack of representation in Parliament and demanded the same rights as other British subjects. Colonial resistance led to violence in 1770 when British soldiers opened fire on a mob of colonists, killing 5 men in what was known as the Boston Massacre. On December 16, 1773, in Boston, Massachusetts, American colonists, frustrated and angry at Britain for imposing taxation without representation, dumped 342 chests of tea imported by the British East India Company into the harbor. In response, the outraged British Parliament passed a series of measures known as the Intolerable or Coercive Acts, designed to reassert imperial authority in Massachusetts. In September 1774, a group of colonial delegates, including George Washington of Virginia, John and Samuel Adams of Massachusetts, Patrick Henry of Virginia, and John Jay of New York, met in Philadelphia to give voice to their grievances against the British Crown. This First Continental Congress did not go so far as to demand independence from Britain, but it denounced taxation without representation, as well as the maintenance of the British Army in the colonies without their consent. It issued a declaration of the rights due every citizen, including life, liberty, property, assembly, and trial by jury. The Continental Congress voted to meet again in May 1775 to consider further action, but by then, violence had already broken out. On the night of April 18, 1775, hundreds of British troops marched from Boston to nearby Concord, Massachusetts, in order to seize an arms cache. Paul Revere and other writers sounded the alarm, and colonial militiamen began mobilizing to intercept the Redcoats. On April 19, 1775, local militiamen clashed with British soldiers in the battles of Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts, marking the shot heard round the world that signified the start of the American Revolutionary War. A month after the beginning of the Revolutionary War, the Second Continental Congress met in Philadelphia, and delegates, including new additions Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, voted to form a Continental Army, with George Washington as its commander-in-chief. On June 17, 1775, in the Revolution's first major battle, colonial forces inflicted heavy casualties on the British regiment of General William Howe at Breed's Hill in Boston. The engagement, known as the Battle of Bunker Hill, ended in British victory, but lent encouragement to the revolutionary cause. By June 1776, with the Revolutionary War in full swing, a growing majority of the colonists had come to favor independence from Britain. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress voted to adopt the Declaration of Independence, drafted by a 5-man committee including Benjamin Franklin and John Adams, but written mainly by Thomas Jefferson. In general terms, the introduction of the Declaration of Independence effectively stated that seeking independence from Britain had become necessary for the colonies. While the body of the document outlined a list of grievances against the British Crown, the preamble includes its most famous passage. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." After formally declaring independence from Great Britain in July 1776, the Continental Congress sent a group of several commissioners led by Benjamin Franklin to negotiate an alliance with France. When news of the Declaration of Independence and British evacuation of Boston reached France, the French foreign minister decided in favor of an alliance. However, once news of General George Washington's defeats in New York reached Europe in August of 1776, the French foreign minister wavered, questioning the wisdom of committing to a full alliance. Benjamin Franklin's popularity in France bolstered French support for the American cause. The French public viewed Franklin as a representative of Republican simplicity and honesty, an image Franklin cultivated. A rage for all things Franklin and Americans swept France, assisting American diplomats and the French foreign minister in pushing for an alliance. In the meantime, the foreign minister agreed to provide the United States with a secret loan. Despite the loan and the discussions of a full alliance, French assistance to the new United States was limited at the start. Throughout 1777, the French delayed as they conducted negotiations with the Spanish government, which was wary of U.S. independence and also wanted assurances that Spain would regain territories if it went to war against the British. When news of the British surrender at the Battle of Saratoga reached France in December 1777, the French foreign minister finally decided in favor of an official French alliance with the United States. On February 6, 1778, Benjamin Franklin and two commissioners signed a Treaty of Alliance and a Treaty of Amity and Commerce with France. The Treaty of Alliance contained the provisions the U.S. commissioners had originally requested, but also included a clause forbidding either country to make a separate peace with Britain, as well as a secret clause allowing for Spain or other European powers to enter into the alliance. On June 21, 1779, Spain declared war on Great Britain, creating a de facto alliance with the United States. The Treaty of Amity and Commerce also promoted trade between the United States and France and recognized the United States as an independent nation. Between 1778 and 1782, the French provided supplies, arms and ammunition, uniforms, and most importantly, troops and naval support to the Continental Army. The French Navy transported reinforcements, fought off a British fleet, and protected Washington's forces in Virginia. French assistance was crucial in securing the British surrender at Yorktown in 1781. In 1779, de Grasse was promoted to Rear Admiral, and in 1781 he was promoted again to Full Admiral and given the flagship Ville de Paris and command of a fleet of 23 to 28 warships. He captured the island of Tobago, then received orders to sail for the North American coast to support the combined Franco-American army under General George Washington and the Comte de Rochambeau. On July 28, 1781, de Grasse wrote to General Washington that the whole will be embarked in vessels of war from 25 to 29 in number, which will depart from this colony on the 3rd of August and proceed directly to the Chesapeake Bay. Rochambeau believed in harnessing the power of French naval forces against British General Charles Cornwallis's army in Virginia. Admiral de Grasse agreed and sailed his fleet for the Chesapeake Bay. On September 5, 1781, de Grasse's fleet blocked the British squadron from coming to the aid of Cornwallis, leaving the British force cut off from Royal Navy assistance. The American and French armies arrived soon after, beginning the climactic siege of Yorktown, Virginia, on September 28, 1781. The Battle of Yorktown lasted until October 19, 1781, and ended with a decisive victory by a combined force of the American Continental Army troops led by General George Washington, with the support from the French, including French troops and a French naval force led by the Admiral de Grasse. Although the Battle of Yorktown marked the end of major fighting on the mainland, the American Revolutionary War continued at sea after Cornwallis' surrender to the Patriots on October 19, 1781. Admiral de Grasse's fleet won two more victories, capturing the islands of St. Eustatius and St. Kitts. But on April 12, 1782, Admiral de Grasse suffered a serious defeat at the Battle of the Saints, a furious day-long contest in which both fleets were fully engaged. The British, led by Admiral George Rodney, crippled his flagship Ville de Paris and captured de Grasse, who found himself a prisoner of war for the second time in his military career. The British victory at the Battle of the Saints halted French momentum and improved the British position at the peace negotiations in 1783. It also forced the French and Spanish to abandon a planned invasion of Jamaica. With the consent of France, U.S. commissioners entered negotiations with Britain to end the war and reached a preliminary agreement in 1782. Benjamin Franklin informed the French foreign minister of the agreement and also asked for an additional loan, which the United States received. So strong was the connection between the United States and France that representatives of both countries successfully presented a united front despite British attempts to drive a wedge between the Allies during their separate peace negotiations. On September 3, 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed in France by representatives of King George III of Great Britain and representatives of the United States, ending the American Revolutionary War and formally recognizing the United States as an independent nation. The three American negotiators, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay, proved themselves ready for the world stage, achieving many of the objectives sought by the new United States. Two crucial provisions of the treaty were British recognition of U.S. independence and setting the boundaries that would allow for American Western expansion. As part of the agreement, the British ceded a vast area known as the Northwest Territory to the United States, which included the present-day states of Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and parts of Minnesota. Alongside the Treaty of Paris, Great Britain signed separate peace treaties with France, Spain, and the Netherlands in September 1783. The whole peace process brought a budding United States into the arena of international diplomacy, playing against the largest and most established powers on Earth. Once the American Revolutionary War ended in September 1783, Admiral de Grasse returned to France, and after being cordially welcomed by the King and Queen, he blamed his subordinates for the defeat at the Battle of the Saints. An official investigation was conducted by the French, and in January 1784, Admiral de Grasse and several of his captains were court-martialed. The findings of the courts awarded slight punishments to some of the captains who failed in their duty and acquitted the admiral, while criticizing him rather severely and unfavorably for certain failures during the beginning of the Battle of the Saints. These were failures that Admiral de Grasse had blamed on his captains, although it no longer mattered. The admiral, dissatisfied with the findings of the court, asked for a new trial, but it was refused. The minister replied that the king, while he believed everything was done to prevent the misfortunes of the day, was dissatisfied with the admiral's conduct insofar as the bringing of charges against his officers were concerned, and forbade him an audience. Under the circumstances, and with his military career at an end, there was nothing more for Francois de Grasse to do but to retire to his home to meditate upon the fickleness of faith. On the other hand, a great joy awaited the Count de Grasse at his small castle at Tilly. He was to be reunited with his family after nearly half a century at sea, and to enjoy the pleasures of home life. At the time of his retirement, his only son was 18 years old and his youngest daughter 10. 2 years later, in 1786, Count de Grasse got married for a third time, to a woman who is said to have brought him only unhappiness. Count de Grasse also owned a hotel in Paris, where he could occasionally mingle with the society he liked, for his titles and his fame, coupled with the natural charm of manner, assured for him a high place in Parisian life. However, his favorite place of residence was the castle of Tilly. He was not only the owner of the castle, but the lord of Tilly, of Saint Laurent, of Flins, of Monderville, and other places, and he gave encouragement to the tilling of the fields and helping the farmers. An object of the admiral's special care was the simple church of Tilly. This church had no steeple, and so Count de Grasse had one added at his personal expense and equipped it with a bell. Here he often went to pray with his children. Honors arrived from the United States for the Count de Grasse in the shape of a gold medal of the Order of the Society of Cincinnati. The Congress of the United States voted to send him 4 cannons, and great excitement filled the little village the day they arrived. Upon each engraved the following inscription: "Taken from the English army by the combined forces of France and America at Yorktown in Virginia on the 19th of October, 1781, and presented by Congress to His Excellency the Count de Grasse, as a testimony of the priceless services rendered by him on that memorable day. These guns were set up on carriages and placed in the courtyard. One can still see the iron grating pierced with loopholes for the muzzles. Unfortunately, the guns themselves are gone, sacrificed to the vandalism of the French Revolution, which began in May 1789. Admiral Francois-Joseph Paul Comte de Grasse, Marquis of Grasse-Tilly, passed away on January 14, 1788, at the age of 66, at his hotel in Paris. As weird as this may sound, this may have been a favorable time for Count de Grasse to pass away, for a few years later, France would be lashed by the fierce violence of the French Revolution. It is more than likely that Admiral de Grasse would have fallen victim to the guillotine for having served the monarchy so well and for so many years. Nonetheless, Admiral de Grasse passed away, and by his express wish, his body was buried in the Church of Saint Roch in Paris, and his heart was removed and taken to rest in his little church of Our Lady at Tilly. In a simple shallow grave near the altar, the embalmed heart was deposited enclosed in a lead shell. This last wish bespeaks eloquently the tender and sentimental nature of the man. Surviving Admiral de Grasse were his third wife and his 5 children. 2 had already died. De Grasse was a commander of the Order of St. Louis and a knight of the Order of St. John of Jerusalem. He was also a member of the American Society of the Cincinnati. In a letter dated April 28, 1788, a year before he took office as the first president of the United States, George Washington wrote, "I am sorry to learn that the Count de Grasse, our gallant coadjutor in the capture of Cornwallis, is no more. Yet his death is not perhaps so much to be deplored as his latter days were to be pitied. It seemed as if an unfortunate and unrelenting destiny pursued him to destroy the enjoyment of all earthly comfort. The disastrous battle of the 12th of April, the loss of the favor of his king, and the subsequent connection in marriage with an unworthy woman were sufficient to have made him weary of the burden of life. But his frailty should now be buried in the grave with him, while his name will be long deservedly dear to this country, on account of his successful cooperation in the glorious campaign of 1781. The French Revolution was a turning point in world history that began in 1789 and ended in the late 1790s with the ascent of Napoleon Bonaparte. During this period, French citizens radically changed their political landscape, uprooting institutions that had been around for centuries, such as the monarchy and the feudal system. The upheaval was caused by disgust with the French aristocracy and the economic policies of King Louis XVI, who met his death by guillotine, as did his wife Marie Antoinette. Offered asylum in the United States, the descendants of Admiral Francois de Grasse escaped prison and the guillotine by fleeing across the ocean, where they were tendered every care under the guidance of George Washington, who of all men was best able to appreciate the sterling qualities of their father. The daughters remained in the United States, married and founded prosperous and respected families, whose descendants survive to this day, and the son later returned to France and had 5 daughters who died childless. There are, however, many collateral descendants of the illustrious name de Grasse in France today. On October 19, 1931, a U.S. postage stamp was issued honoring Comte de Rochambeau, George Washington, and Comte de Grasse, and commemorating the 150th anniversary of the victory at the Siege of Yorktown in 1781. On August 5, 1978, the U.S. Navy commissioned the USS Comte de Grasse in honor of Admiral Francois-Joseph Paul Comte de Grasse. The USS Comte de Grasse served the United States proudly until she was decommissioned in June 1998. This was the third and final vessel named in his honor by the United States Navy. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you've learned something new today. Season 3 of Hidden History will explore the lives of veterans of the United States, as well as veterans of foreign countries historically connected to our nation. Many of their stories have been hidden in the pages of history and deserve to be told. Pictures, newspaper clippings, and links to external articles relating to a particular episode are available on our website, hiddenhistorypod.com. Thanks again for listening. I'm John Rodriguez, and until we meet again, this has been Hidden History and Odyssey Through Time.